speaking of things that are in the public domain, how would fan fiction factor into transmedia?
Fan fiction is a really important part of community building because fans like to play in the sandbox themselves and create. Strictly, definitionally, the fan fiction doesn't necessarily connect into the broader transmedia conversation. It only because it's not canon. And so when we're talking about transmedia, we're really talking about how do you extend a story across multiple platforms in a way that's canonized. And canon just means official, right? So is this official Star Wars stuff or not? And if it's official Star Wars stuff, then it's going to be a transmediated extension. If it's not, it's just something. It's something else. It's a valuable part of your community building, and it's part of your participatory culture as a creator, encouraging your fans to add their stories in. But for me as a fan, and this is where it matters. For me as a fan of any IP, if I know something is canon, then I'm more likely to check it out because I know it's official. But if you just write your own short story about Game of Thrones and it's not canon, I may check it out, but I really have no incentive to check it out, especially if I don't know you, right? So when we're talking about how do you create the migration of the audience is generated based on canonization and not. And for example, I've never been a fan of Legos. Not the toys, but like I don't particularly love the Lego IP. I've just never been a huge fan of the movie. The song kind of irritates me. I step on Legos having a kid. Like there's this Lego thing that I have. So I don't love Legos. To the point that where even though I love Star Wars, they had a Lego Star Wars cartoon that I didn't watch. And the reason I didn't watch it isn't because I hated Legos. That had something to do with it. But the Star Wars Legos cartoons weren't canon. They weren't wrapped into the continuity of the Star Wars universe. And so because I don't like Legos and this wasn't canon, I didn't watch it. I didn't need to. That wasn't part of the puzzle for me. But one day I see on Twitter that said, Lucasfilm says, Star Wars Legos is now part of the continuity. It's now part of canon. So the first episode, for example, of the new Star Wars Legos was, do you remember in The Force Awakens? In The Force Awakens, Han and Chewie, they have the Rathtars on the ship and the big monsters that they catch. And Finn says to Han, he says, "You have Rathtars on the ship. How did you get Rathtars?" And Han said, "Well, we used to have a bigger crew." And they move on and they don't reference it anymore, right? First episode of Star Wars Legos shows how Han and Chewie got the Rathtars, right? And it's canon, which means it's real. It's actually part of the puzzle. So guess what I do? Despite my hatred of Legos, I go watch the cartoon because I want that piece of the puzzle. The second episode of Star Wars Legos, if you remember back to The Force Awakens, Poe and Finn crash land on Jakku, and Finn wakes up, doesn't know where Poe is, thinks he's dead, and then we find Poe at the end of the movie when they reconnect. Where's Poe been that entire time? Second episode of Star Wars Legos follows Poe on the adventure that he goes on after he wakes up from the crash, and it's canon. Therefore, I have incentive to watch it. Now, if that had just been your short story or a fan film or a fans made like the little stop motion Lego things like they do, that's cool. But me as another fan have no incentive to check that out. I may applaud you and give you a thumbs up and but I don't necessarily know if I'll take my time to do that. So that's where I'm not anti-fan fiction at all. I think it's awesome for creators to encourage fans to play in their sandbox in a participatory way. I go so far as to say creators should encourage them to play in the sandbox and actually take the opportunity to canonize certain parts of fan fiction. And that's as a way, I don't know if it's sort of a contest way, but as a way to validate the fan base in a valuable way. So definitely I'm pro fan fiction, 100%, But definitionally, when we're talking about transmedia, I consider it right outside the door just because of the canonization question.